bring you guys a comparison between the Mate 10 Pro and the Huawei P20 Pro. I did just do my first 10 things video on the P20 Pro, so if you just picked this up, want some nice tips and tricks, I'll drop the link below so you can check it out. Now this is mainly addressed at my US audience because the only phone we can buy here in the US is the Mate 10 Pro. The P20 Pro is not officially available. If you want it, you have to import it, which is what I did. So a lot of people have been wondering, is the Mate 10 Pro and the P20 Pro really a lot different? Is there a real reason not to get the Mate 10 Pro if you like some of the features on the P20 Pro? So let's talk a little bit about it. There's a lot of similarities and a few key differences that you should know about. Now, first of all, the price, of course. The P20 Pro, if you've imported, it's going to be around $850 to $900. I paid about $880 over on eBay when I imported mine. The Mate 10 Pro has been on sale for about $650 to $675 here in the US. You can find it over at Amazon. So the price obviously is a differentiator, about $200 difference between the price. Also, you get an official warranty, the Mate 10 Pro. Now, aside from that, there's a lot of similarities between the phone in terms of their hardware. Both of these phones run the Kirin 970 processor, which is Huawei's in-house chip. They're both very, very smooth with that 970 processor. In terms of day-to-day performance, you won't even notice that they're a little bit below the Snapdragon 845 and benchmarks, which the Kirin 970 is. In gaming, you'll notice it a little bit step below the Galaxy S9 Plus, but if you're a casual user, it's really not going to be a huge difference, and both of them are very fluid. Both of them also come with 128 gigs of storage and 6 gigabytes of RAM, so you have no problem loading apps and things like that. Really no issues at all navigating around the UI. Gaming and also reloading apps doesn't seem to be much of a problem whatsoever. So that being said, a lot of the under-the-hood hardware specs are exactly the same, so those are not really a key differentiator. Most of the key differentiators here in design, the camera, and also a little bit in the software differences because the P20 Pro has been upgraded to EMUI, the Emotion UI 8.1, whereas the Mate 10 Pro is still running on EMUI 8.0. That also translates over to the Android versions. The P20 Pro is on 8.1, while the Mate 10 Pro is on 8.0. Now obviously, let's talk a little bit about the design differences first. There are some clear design differences here. You can see on the back of the phone, the P20 Pro is a little bit more reflective. I've got the midnight blue color, which just naturally is a little more reflective than the gray. But that being said, this is more of a mirror finish, even though both of them do have that glass black that's a little bit reflective. The Huawei branding is in a slightly different place on both sides. You notice that you have a fingerprint sensor on the back of the Mate 10 Pro, while the fingerprint sensor is actually around front here on the P20 Pro. Also on the P20 Pro, you've got the triple camera setup with the 40 megapixels maximum resolution, very impressive, while on the Mate 10 Pro you have only a dual camera setup with the 20 megapixels maximum resolution. Both cameras are quite good, and we'll talk about that in a second. On the side, you do have the power button volume rocker setup pretty much in the same spot on both phones. You'll notice the camera bump is significantly more protruding on the P20 Pro as well if you put them in the side-by-side profile. If you look around front, you'll notice there is somewhat of a strange choice on the P20 Pro. Despite going with the notch setup for the display, you'll see that there is a fingerprint sensor embedded in the bottom chin, which actually takes up some of that screen-to-body ratio. And for that reason, the difference in screen-to-body ratio is not that large between the two. The Mate 10 Pro has around an 80%, while the P20 Pro has around an 82%. Both of them do have that bottom chin. One of them has the Huawei logo there on the Mate 10 Pro, while the other one has the fingerprint sensor. So that is one of the big differences, whether or not you want this setup with the fingerprint sensor on the front and the notch, which is hideable. We'll talk about that in a second. Whether or not you want the front fingerprint sensor or the rear-mounted sensor. Personally, I like the design of the Mate 10 Pro a little bit better because I like the rear-mounted sensor. I also find it to be a bit of a strange choice to put the front fingerprint sensor on the phone instead of the rear sensor on the P20 Pro, since they did go with the notch setup, which is supposed to increase your screen real estate. I guess maybe they were just trying to get away from not copying Apple as much as they possibly could, and in doing that, they decided to stick with a front fingerprint sensor since Apple abandoned it on the iPhone 10. So design is definitely one of the big places where there's some differences. The other difference is, as I said, in the software. So if we go into here, you'll see that they have a very similar settings menu. Both of them have this very nice dark mode you can see on both sides, but we do have a slight difference in the version numbers that they are running. You will notice that the Mate 10 Pro is running on Emotion UI 8.0, while the P20 Pro is running on Emotion UI 8.1. Now there are some small differences in the overall settings and things like that. One of the biggest differences between the two is that you have extra navigation options, which I showed off in my first video for the P20 Pro. That's mainly because you have the physical button on the front. Most of the other settings in terms of things that you see from their main settings menu are unchanged. They did do a few nice things with power management and notification management, which are mostly improvements, but nothing that would be a deal breaker and stop you from getting the Mate 10 Pro. Perhaps the biggest difference is actually in the software for the camera. If you open up the camera app, you'll notice that they're completely different. The one on the P20 Pro has been redesigned to be much improved. On the Mate 10 Pro, you swipe over to get to your settings and then swipe over this way to get to modes. Here you have a dedicated settings button at the top, which I think makes things a little bit more organized, and then you can actually swipe through the carousel to get to the various modes between portrait, aperture, photo mode, video, pro, etc. So this is a really nice interface change. Other things that have been changed is that you've got a video button here gets switched out for the selfie cam button. Otherwise, it's much cleaner and much nicer to use in everyday photo taking if you're using this camera as your dedicated point and shoot camera. Aside from that, let's also talk about the camera, because that is another big difference between the two phones. I did take some comparison photos. I've only had my P20 Pro for a short 48-hour period, but I did want to share with you guys some of my findings. I'll try to do a follow-up more in-depth camera comparison later. This is the P20 Pro versus the Mate 10 Pro at night, taking a photo of my car just after I washed it. If you zoom in, you will notice that the P20 Pro does have a little bit better detail in the rims and fine details like that, but it does appear that the Mate 10 Pro itself does a little bit better job at getting good lighting around the edges. So it's a bit of a toss-up here in this particular photo, but I did notice that in low light conditions, the P20 Pro tends to give you good lighting while also maintaining the true colors of the situation. The Mate 10 Pro adds a little bit of a reddish tint here that isn't actually present in the shot when I took it. In the daytime, there's really very little difference between the two cameras. I couldn't notice very much at all. If you look at these two shots in the Mate 10 Pro versus the P20 Pro, you can see pretty much the same level of detail, same brightness and everything like that, which is exactly what I would expect from two very good cameras in daylight conditions. This photo, you can see a little bit more of what I'm talking about with adding a little bit of a tint. You can see the difference between the Mate 10 Pro and the P20 Pro. I really do like the fact that you capture true-to-life colors on the P20 Pro. So in my preliminary sort of examination, I would say the P20 Pro has an advantage in the camera setup with that triple camera. In low light, it does seem to do a better job of capturing true colors while also getting sufficient brightness. It doesn't blow out any shots or overexpose things like I've seen sometimes on the Galaxy S9 Plus. Sort of the final little things to clean up and talk about: battery life. Both of them have a 4,000 milliamp hour battery, which is plenty for a full day. Even if you're a power user, I get about 7 hours screen on time from both of the phones. Of course, I've only put 2 power cycles through the P20 Pro, but that's still very, very impressive for a day's use of battery life. If you turn on that dark mode that I showed you guys earlier, you can save even more battery life. The speakers, very, very good on the P20 Pro and the Mate 10 Pro. I would say the P20 Pro has a slight advantage in terms of clarity and also in terms of loudness overall. The software, like I said, this one on the P20 Pro is a bit more updated, newer security patches, but in terms of overall functionality, EMUI still functions essentially in the same way. It's very different than a lot of the skins you'll see on Android, and it is an acquired taste. But there's really a lot of improvement that's happened over time from Huawei, and I do commend their effort in sort of improving that software, but the experiences are basically the same on both of these phones. So that's pretty much it in terms of the overall comparison. The big differences here being the design with the fingerprint sensor being on the back on the Mate 10 Pro, and the front-facing fingerprint sensor with that notch on the front on the P20 Pro, and then of course the cameras, both the software and the actual camera sensors and photo quality. So if you don't really need that triple camera setup with the extra low light performance at night, and you don't care about that slight difference in true to life or warmer colors, and you prefer the fingerprint sensor on the back, there's really no reason to not go out and get the Mate 10 Pro if you live here in the US. It's still on sale for a pretty good deal, around $650 at a lot of outlets, and it's still a very good phone with very impressive battery life. Anyways, guys, that's my comparison of the Mate 10 Pro and P20 Pro. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification icon so I can make future videos like this.